Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Be the Wolf. I'm here today with Kimberly Spencer. We're going to talk about something you've probably never heard of. We're going to talk about money bulimia and the cyclical patterns that sabotage your business success, as well as that place of taking a pause so that you can really step into something new without repeating the patterns. I am here today with Kimberly Spencer. She's an award-winning, high-performance, trauma-informed coach and trainer. She's done the Amazon bestseller book thing, and she's a TEDx speaker. And she's the founder of crownyourself.com. And before we jump into all that juicy stuff, Kimberly, why don't you give us the lowdown on what it is that you actually do?
So I work with leaders at the precipice of reinvention, where they've scaled their business, they've grown something substantial from the sidelines, and like they've actively been an active participant in it, growing it, but they're now ready to claim their full visibility, their voice, their energetic sovereignty in essence, and step out there. Maybe that's with a book, or maybe that's with launching a podcast, or maybe that's just growing their personal brand, but they are ready to take their leadership from the shadows. And that's really where I step in, both with my background with Communication Queens, with podcast guesting and those strategies, and then also combining it with the high performance strategies of helping them get clarity, energy, because it takes a lot of energy to get yourself out there and to generate the energy that magnetizes people to want to listen, and giving them, ultimately supporting them in building structures that allow them to be more courageous and bold and fully expressed.
That's a lot, in the sense that a lot of people are at this place where they're hitting a plateau. They know they want to take their business to the next level, and they're trying, but they can't seem to break that ceiling. And it sounds like that's a place where you come in. And I know from my work with clients that usually it is because you need to undo some patterns so that you can step into a more expansive, fuller version of yourself that can actually hold and maintain that new level of success and impact that you're going for. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, it's a lot of undoing and unraveling and unbecoming, as much as it is adding new things, because it's not just looking at, most business owners come to me where they're in the space of like, how can I add this onto my plate? And I'm like, well, what needs to be stripped away? And not necessarily is it a business or a relationship, or we need to, chuck that relationship in the trash. More often than not, it's your belief systems. Right. It's your belief systems around capacity, your belief systems around money and wealth and sustainability and success, and what that looks like for you versus the plagiarized programming that you've been conditioned to accept that were other people's belief systems, normally your caretakers from childhood.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll definitely dig into that and dig into the patterns. But before we do that, why is it that you do what you do? Why is this work important to you?
Well, I love entrepreneurs and I love founders, and I'm a second generation entrepreneur, and I got to see my parents scale and grow over the course of 30 years, a multi-million-dollar business, in trees, like good hard labor, hard work, while my dad was a highly functioning addict at the same time. And having overcome from childhood, I saw my gifts. That one of the things that I work on with my clients a lot is finding their zone of genius. And it took me a while to find mine, because normally you are shamed for that space. And my role as a challenger and a coach, and like a loving challenger, not like let's push you just for pushing's sake, but to be able to lovingly challenge people to grow, that was where I got to hold this paradox of, I saw two different behaviors with my dad. I got to see him loving and sober and amazing. And then I got to see the asshole alcoholic dad that was abusive. And being able to see the paradox held within one person and how sometimes our belief systems can keep us stuck in a behavior and patterns and give us results that hurt other people. And sometimes our behavior and patterns can actually elevate and help us rise. I still to this day say my dad was my greatest influence for the first third of my life, because until he passed, now my greater influence is my kids. But the way that I was shaped with his influence was both highly positive. He had a phenomenal money mindset, but also highly negative because he didn't believe he deserved it. And I think that being able to navigate that shadow and that light, that's where I'm able to really walk with my clients. And how I've had to learn how to walk with myself is through the depths of all those deep shadows that we see and face, and the hard ones to look at that stare at us, that we hate, that we don't like within ourselves. And instead of trying to avoid it and escape it and pretend it doesn't exist, we run right through it and go through it. And through that is your freedom.
Yeah. One of the things that I've seen over and over and over is that we repeat the dynamics of our childhood, and we repeat it in business, we repeat it in relationship, we repeat it in health. So I hear in yours, it's like you've got this big, like, rise to the top, go, 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 go. We can do all of it. And then let's just throw it all away, which is very ironic. And of course, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about money bulimia, and we're going to talk about deeper patterns and all of that. And I can see that so clearly in your story.
Yeah.
And I'm sure people who are listening, if you start to really look at what was the childhood dynamic, not break it down emotionally, but just look at the basic pattern of it. What did you see growing up? And it's probably the thing that you keep recreating in your life. For me, I keep creating chaos and crisis and things like that. So my work has always been, how do I keep my system calm and access the higher level of emotions of creation, like joy, peace, and love, so that I can keep building. Because if you're in the lower level emotions, you're just repeating a destruction cycle. You can only build and create if you're in the higher level emotions.
Yeah, and that's why I value courage so much, because that's really the tipping point of the emotional vibration that shifts people into new action, myself included. And it takes courage to not just do new things, because it's not just about doing new things. Sometimes it's about facing yourself. Like, it took me forever. Like, why I call it money bulimia is because I was bulimic. I was bulimic for 10 years. That was my system of control. And now I choose courage over control for the most part. I'm not 100% perfect. There's definitely been some spaces recently illuminated where I'm like, oh, I'm still trying to control there. Oh, I need to step into greater courage. Okay, great. Like, let's go. But I just run right through it now, rather than the delay and the lag period that it took, which was 10 years of healing from bulimia, where bulimia was my form of being able to control the chaos around me. And when I struggled with it from the age of 12 and to the age of 22. And it wasn't until, like, I didn't get into personal development through mindset work. I got into it through the body. My first business was at 19 years old as a freelance Pilates instructor, and I grew it into a six-figure private Pilates studio business in Los Angeles. And that was my first foray into the body. And I didn't get into it to make money, essentially. I got into it to help people, because I finally found a form of exercise where I didn't feel like I was dying. And because I was an exercise-induced asthmatic, and I couldn't run a mile to save my life when I was 17. And I would go to the gym and I'd look at these equipments, and I knew I wanted to find a way to balance, to figure out my body and to figure out this body thing. I was on a quest of curiosity, and I was trying new things. I was trying different diets. I was trying different ways of being in order to support myself to not have the slow form of suicide, which is bulimia.
Right.
And that path led me to finding Pilates. And once I found that, I was like, holy crap. like nervous system regulation. What is that? Like, what? I can have balance, and oh my gosh, it was beautiful. And that experience of being able to experience personal development through the body was my first step into seeing how I can help people. Like that was my desire, and also it was my goal to move out of my parents' house. So I was like, okay, job, occupation, and I have a tool that's an asset that I can use to help people because it's also helping me. And it was my first step into leading authentically. Within a year of teaching, I didn't know anything about business. I knew through osmosis, through my parents, but I didn't know anything about conversions or metrics or anything like that. I just went in with a heart of service, and I said, I have to help people do this. And I went in with my own authentic story of like, I am an exercise-induced asthmatic. I can't run a mile to save my life, but I found this form of exercise that I really like that's helping me. I think it could help you too. And I would demonstrate and show people how it could help them. And then they would be like, oh my gosh, yeah, this is amazing. I feel this, I engage this, and suddenly I feel more confident. And I've had so many clients come to me and say, I chose you and working with you over somebody else because of how authentic and true you were about your own experience. And I wasn't too forward with my experience with bulimia back then, but with just not even liking exercise, and just being honest about where I was. And like that experience alone was what shifted and converted clients was from truth. It wasn't from trying to hide.
Yeah.
And so I started seeing, wow, where are all those other places and spaces where I've hid? And where are all those things that I've been hiding from myself? And when I started to peel back those layers and really get honest about, certain abuses that I experienced growing up with my father when he was drinking, and saying, I'm ready to look at this in the eye and I'm ready to face this shit. And that was what sped up the healing, so that within 2 years, I healed myself from bulimia with no psychological or medical intervention.
Yeah.
Problem was those underlying currents of the deep-seated root was the belief in deserving. And so, because when not only did I grow up with the dichotomy of a father, but with the dichotomy of having of religion as well, where I had preaching, go to Sunday church versus 6 days a week, you're not being the leader that you could be for your family in other ways other than providing financially. Like that parallel, and the underlying belief that is in a lot of fundamentalist Christianity, which I was raised in, was this belief of, oh, I don't deserve it.
Yeah.
And it's this lack of deserving. And I'm like, that underlying undertow of deserving caused me to put myself into then relationships. So the theme of deserving, the theme of bulimia jumped from me being it being a persecution of my body to it being putting myself in relationships that were quite persecuting. And not only with abusive partners, one who robbed me, but like putting myself in spaces where I didn't feel I deserved to have the man that I wrote down, 50 things of who I wanted in my ideal partner in an elated state. I think I was 16.
Right.
I wrote down the 50 things I wanted in my ideal partner, and the amazing man who just brought me coffee. Now I have that. But
Yes.
it took going through kissing a few frogs first, and really not even honoring my own decision of like, that's the boundaries, that's the standard of what I wanted. So I lowered my standard. And I love what Ed Milet says, if you don't get your goals, you get your standards. So I lowered my standards of what I deemed as acceptable. And I was like, oh, let me just go for the bare minimum. He's kind of nice to me, has a job, has like food in his refrigerator, stable. That says stable to me. That says not chaotic. And yeah, the chaos was real. The chaos was very present.
And that's a big thing when you're talking about when you have chaos in your childhood, you are subconsciously always seeking stability. And because I always say, for the people that are old enough to know how to drive a stick shift, you have to go from a low gear to a high gear, you have to go through neutral. And neutral is that place of stability.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you are looking for something better, greater, so often we're trying to jump ahead without going through neutral. So in a way, it was kind of good that you went to that first level of, oh, this is stable, because you had to learn how to hold something stable before you could learn how to hold the bigger, grander, higher vibration frequency, the higher gear thing.
Mm-hmm.
And going back, just looking at the entire story, when we talk about patterns and these subconscious things that keep sabotaging our life in different ways, and you talked about, there was the bulimia, but it showed up other places that, if you're listening, you can think of the things that are happening in your life that you don't like, and just imagine that there is a deeper reason that's probably driving like most of those things that you don't like. So there's a root cause of the bulimia. And I share often my story of smoking. Like, I was trying to quit smoking forever and ever and ever. And then I lost my voice for 10 days, and then I quit smoking like that, because one of the root reasons of me smoking was so I could connect. It was a crutch for connection. But losing my voice, my subconscious mind was like, well, that's not going to get her what she wants, so that's out. And it was even deeper than connection. So as you dove through this repeat of bulimia type situations where it's like you take it all in and then you let it all go.
Let it all go.
You said it was the value and not feeling worthy. If it were deeper than that, do you imagine what it might be? What might be the deeper pattern than even that?
I mean, worth is interesting because there's a belief in earning. It wasn't until I think I was 2018, maybe 2019. I'd had my son. I was at a personal development conference with one of my mentors and my mom. And I just helped this guy get this big breakthrough in realizing that he was sexually abused. And it was the first time that I'd ever said that I was sexually abused when I was a child in public to anyone. That broke open the flood doors to the next day. I realized that when I was 24, before I had met my husband, that I had been raped.
Mm.
And it took me a minute to I had to actually go and look up the actual definition of what that was. Cause I was like, no, okay. There were certain circumstances surrounding that where I was like, was I? Because I'm super picky and careful about language. I'm like, I am neurotic about language. Like I really, and I never would want to claim something that I've seen women claim that is not actually accurate.
Right.
And that when I really looked at the definition, I was like, oh, no, yep. Looking back, yep. I said no, yep. Said it again. Nope, he didn't listen. All right. And it was, and I wrote about it in my book because it wasn't something in the movies. It wasn't chase you down the alley and all that. But I had this, I took the morning and I told my mom, I said, wow, I just realized that this happened. She's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. She didn't quite know how to process it.
Right.
My mom, classic codependent, avoidant of feelings and talking about that. I said, you go to the conference. I was like, I'm just going to process this on my own. I'm just an emotional processor, but I also need solitude. And it really came up to this belief in deserving and this underlying quest for fairness.
Mm.
Because when you have shit that happens in your life that is not fair, that is not whether it's as a child or as an adult, or you see things and you're like, oh, it's not fair that they are dealing with that. And, oh, you project jealousy or ultimately your golden shadow of what you desire. But you see things that you're like, oh, that's not fair. That person has something that I want and I don't have it. Then we try to create this just world bias of like, how did I create this? How, especially high achievers like myself. And so for me, it was like this, like seeking justice and looking brutally at like, how am I still allowing myself to be victimized, even if it's by my own self? And ultimately, I would say that is the underlying deeper thing of the praise and societal acceptance and connection that can come from victimhood.
Mm.
And that's a tough one. It's a tough one, but it's also an easy one to flip, because in order to shift from being a victim, you have to shift into being a creator and take ultimate responsibility for being a creator of your own life.
Right.
But it's not a sexy conversation to have. And I can tell, I was literally having it last night with myself in my journal. I was like, oh, really? Really? But being able to say, okay, I'm looking and assessing it, like I'm on the quest to find it. And also, I think sometimes it's very easy to like, yes, go find it. But if you're just journaling it out or just talking it out with a coach and you're not actually taking that next step, courageous action, then it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Like you'll repeat this belief again in some area unless you take really bold moves that are in antithesis to that belief system.
Yep.
And so for me, my bold move was I stopped dating idiots.
Oh, that's good.
And I allowed myself, my boyfriend after that, after my ex, was very smart, not to disparage my ex, like he's nice-ish. Yeah. But I started dating a smart guy. And I was like, oh, this is what it's like to actually have like a really intellectual conversation. And oh, okay. And then a few months later, I met my husband and I was like, oh, damn. Like literally, I went back to my list, and that I wrote when I was 16, he hit 48 out of 50. And the only reason why he didn't make the first two was one was that I would have a good relationship with my mother-in-law, and she's unfortunately passed. And then the 50th was very much a 16-year-old writing it, a 16-year-old version of me with religious programming versus the 24-year-old version. And that shifted everything. But then because of those beliefs of victimhood, those beliefs of deservingness, those beliefs of the control freakishness, like I ended up manifesting again in an area that I never thought I would manifest, which was my career. Because prior to that, I was gung-ho about whatever I wanted to do. I wanted to become a screenwriter while I was teaching Pilates. I ended up, co-writing a feature film starring Danny Trejo, got distributed, lifelong dream, 24 years old. Like I wanted to become a Pilates instructor, ended up becoming the highest paid, youngest freelance instructor at the studio that I was freelancing at within a year, like most fully booked classes, all that. And so like any career goal that I set for myself, any obstacle, I was just like, whatever, like I got that.
Yep.
Until I met my former business partner. And in that relationship, I manifested again the not trusting my intuition, not trusting myself. I would say that's also an underlying belief system that really showed up, was the foundation of trust. And I had the orange flags where I was like, shit, like it's a great product, it's a great idea. It all made conscious sense to me. But my intuition was like, I don't think so. Maybe not with this person. But I went forward anyway. And then I manifested financial bulimia.
I think this is a really important thing to stop and take note of. And I think a lot of people experience this, is they start to create better things in one area of their life, but the pattern still has to show up somewhere. And when we're talking about childhood patterns and things that come from that, one of the things that I noticed in my own chaotic childhood is for many, many years, I would make excuses about, oh, she's fine. The fact that she didn't come home for days at a time when I was 6 years old, that's, not okay, but it was just normal. And so it gave me this level of what I would tolerate as normal. And so I think sometimes with our patterns, we tend to make excuses. Like as a kid, we don't necessarily have control over that. But as an adult, just like you did, you're like, oh, I'm going to stop dating idiots. So you made that choice. But if you didn't undo the root cause of the pattern, here it is now going to show up like love life is great. Now where else can it go? Like it already went to your health, it went to your love life, and then now it's got to go into career and business. So give us a breakdown of what money bulimia really looks like in that business.
So money bulimia looks like taking a lot in and then projecting it out. And so if you think of like what bulimia is, you consume a lot of food.
Yeah.
And then you vomit it or purge it back up, or laxatives. What financial bulimia typically, and how it's represented with business owners, is you consume revenue and you can end up consuming more and more revenue. Like you can consume a lot of revenue and then there's so many OPEX expenses. There's many bills. And then suddenly you're left with no profit and no cash flow.
Yeah.
And there's no space to breathe and let money nourish you and grow wealth. And there's a difference between revenue and wealth. Yeah. And just like there is a difference between being on a diet and health. And that experience I'm so grateful for, because I love what you said about making excuses, because I made excuses not only for my own behavior, but also for sales, lack thereof, or performance standards. And it's that constant pattern, in essence, of the making excuses came up. Like making excuses for other people. Oh, it's just a slow month, or it's just this partner, or it's just this manufacturer, or we just need to shift this. And it's like looking at what is the real thing.
And we are so good. Our mind will come up with the best lies, because the best lies are based in truth. So everything that you're saying, oh, the manufacturer, this, oh, they're having problems with this, oh, all that stuff is true. And that's how we convince ourselves to not look at the root cause of the problem, which it sounds like in this case was that you didn't listen to your intuition.
And that conscious-mindedly, everything looked good on paper.
Yeah.
But underlying what I work with a lot of founders on is, what are the subconscious values of their business? And had I recognized that my business partner and I made decisions in very different value systems, not that mine are good or his are good, or mine are bad and his are bad. It was just, they were different. And because we weren't aligned in how we made decisions, we weren't moving and rowing in the same direction. And that caused friction, unnecessarily so, in our relationship, because I grew up with two entrepreneur parents. So small and scrappy is how I start, versus someone who has funding and investment backing. Like there were other investments that I thought we could be spending a lot more wisely in certain scenarios, but different value systems. And so I ended up having a successful exit from that company, being bought out. But the problem was my perspective around how I saw that buyout was, I perceived it as I had lost my company. I perceived it as I was a failure. I perceived it because suddenly for 3 months, I had lawyers and professional men trying to get down my price, versus what I took it as back then was, oh, they're projecting. They showed me like myself in a mirror and said, I'm too young, I'm too inexperienced, I've done this, that, or the other, or something in the business that they didn't agree with, that, oh, let's label this and let's scare her with these tactics. And lawyers don't send you the nicest emails when they're not on your side. So I suddenly had professional men, which total reflection of my father,
Right.
like totally like psychology 101 right there.
I really quick, I think that like a lot of people talk about like men hate women in business and stuff like that, but I think it really is more of a subconscious reflection of if a woman says something that they don't like or criticizes them, that they take it as that reflection of mom criticizing me. Like subconsciously it's happening. Nobody's doing this stuff on purpose. And so it's just this like instant, like, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that makes sense. The instant reflection of the men in business as a reflection of my dad.
Yep. And it's funny. My dad had that same thing. Like my mom and dad, because they were partners, my dad couldn't take meetings. Like he couldn't do bids for older white women because that was the reflection of his mother. My mom could take those bids all the time, no problem. But and my dad was amazing salesperson, like charismatic to a fault. But that one tiny demographic was so hard for him to build relationships with, especially if they had certain more demanding personality characteristics, because he had a very complex and abusive relationship with his mother. So that pattern got repeated. And so, I mean, what you said is so true. And so when I saw that, when I saw these professional men, it took me about 1.5 years to get over and to move through this mindset block that for 1.5 years, I thought, oh, wow, even though I had a successful exit, I thought I lost my company.
Right.
And I thought I lost my business, and I poured so much heart and love into it. And it was my perspective and the lens at which I saw it that caused such a detriment, because it caused me for 1.5 years to doubt my own abilities. It caused me for 1.5 years to doubt my own audacity, to doubt my courage, and it caused me to shrink back. And in that 1.5 years, I came up with the idea for my Crown Yourself coaching business on my honeymoon, because we signed the buyout agreement literally 3 weeks before I got married. So in the months that I was supposed to be like cake testing and doing all the fun wedding things, I was negotiating terms with lawyers. So it wasn't so sexy. But fortunately, what was sexy was my husband, or fiance at that time, being there with me through it. And I was like, oh, this is something super important. And it actually allowed for me and him to have a deeper connection of what it feels like to lose something, because my husband went through a significant loss with his divorce 7 years before he met me. But he lost his business, he lost his wife, he lost so much. He lost his house, he lost his dogs, he lost everything, and had to start over his life at 36. And so that losing my business, my cranial sacral therapist, who was working with me at the time doing body work, she said, what you lost feels like 10% of what your husband experienced. And you actually now get a glimpse that can actually allow you a deeper connection. And that to me was like, oh, okay, now I have actually been to the pit. And I think one of the beautiful things that sucks in the moment, but it's when you're able to recognize that every pit you have fallen into, every pit you have experienced in life, those valleys allow you to have even more light on the other side. Yeah. And they've actually enhanced your capacity for more light. And so when I realized, like, it still is an ever uncovering thing, when I realized that the certain hurt or big feelings or certain emotions, that because I have that amount of depth, I actually can have a great hold, also the container for a great amount of light. Yeah. And just our fear-based brains typically are used to focusing on the fear rather than on like what the amazingness that we have to create. Right. And so going through this experience for 1.5 years in my business with Crown Yourself, I made $115. Woo! In fact, I was so doubting myself and my abilities and my capabilities that I took a job teaching Pilates at another studio to bring in some additional income. I didn't even trust my own Pilates business that I'd had for years. And I said, oh, I'll just take another side job instead of supporting that, and I'll build my coaching business on the side. And it was a lot of side. And it took about a year and a half, and fortunately a pregnancy, to light that fire underneath me again. Because when I realized, when I took that side job teaching Pilates, I took it for less than the pay that I was making when I first started teaching 10 years prior.
Oh, wow.
That's how low my self-esteem was and my level of doubt was.
What I find really interesting is that the loss of this business, like I always, of course, look between the lines because we're always, you and I with our clients, we're looking for what's the underneath thing. But I'm seeing that, you had no bravery because you didn't trust yourself after the business. And the thing that you were subconsciously mad about was that you didn't trust your intuition in the first place. And then you kept, and this is what we all do. We don't trust our intuition. We see that it's not the right fit, or we feel that it's not the right fit. And we go in and we double down and we double down. We keep telling ourselves those excuses, those lies, and keep going. And at that point, we get so far from our intuition that we're left sort of floating in the wind, like wherever any windstorm will take us is where we'll land, and we feel like we have no direction in our life. That's what it sounds like happened to you.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It was and as a recovering flogger, from someone who is very skilled at, if you're familiar with the concept of the drama triangle of the victim, villain, and the victim, the persecutor, and the enabler, or the rescuer, I, like many high achievers, so abhor being in that space of the victim that I would put myself in that space of the persecutor and take more than my fair share of ownership versus being able to. And so that's what I did. I took more than my fair share of ownership over, like, what did I do right in my business? What did I do wrong? What could have I improved on? What could I have done better? And that doubling down effect is we so often want to double down on being right on who we have been.
Yeah.
And that's one of the hardest ones, because you can be right or you can be successful. Like you can be right about who you have been and repeat that and continue in that loop, or you can exit in a new road. And so when I exited financial bulimia, like that was a turn for me when I recognized, oh my gosh, because I found out I was pregnant. I said, I know I have actually, this was before I found out I was pregnant. My son was just a catalyst. I said, I know that this is a problem. I looked at my finances and saw that I was now $40,000 in debt. I said, I know that this is a problem. I know that this is a mindset problem. I saw all the patterns of bulimia, and I said, oh my God, I've just repeated it. It's just with money.
Yeah.
And I said, I know I can shift this because I've done it before. And so I went on a quest to find the tools and resources. And I immediately signed up and got an extra $5,000 in debt, because when you're already 35,000, why not stack on, or when you're already 40,000, why not stack on an extra 5?
Yeah, of course.
Sure. and I signed up for NLP, timeline therapy, and hypnosis training.
Yeah.
And I started going to work and going to town on my mindset. And also then I found out I was pregnant, and I said, this is a non-negotiable, because I now have a 9-month deadline to figure out some shit. And I've got to get this sorted, because I knew that the version of me who I had become was cowardly, quite frankly. Right. And that is not the model that I want for my children, because like you said, courage and you want to get to those higher vibration emotions. That's what I wanted to model, not the chaos that I grew up with. And so in order to do that, I had to take some courageous moves.
Yeah.
And I took that courageous moves, and I found that my bottleneck with sales, to start off with the revenue problem, was not that I was comfortable with selling Pilates. I was scared with selling coaching because I didn't know what I was selling. It's like selling an intangible was scary to me, because I was like, what do you mean results? I can show you literally in 40 minutes how to get results with your body, but how could I do that with the mind? And then I learned some tools in order to be able to do that. And that emboldened me to start having confidence to start selling my services as a coach. And when I looked at the money bulimia aspect, the deeper fear in there was my fear of rejection. I was scared of being rejected by people. I was scared of putting myself out there. So for a year and a half in my business, what I did was what I lovingly call productive procrastination, which is just a sparkly business turd where you look really good on Instagram and you have the photo shoots and like everything looks like really perfect.
Right.
And underlying it, there's no systems, no structure, no KPIs, and no revenue. And that was what I said. Okay, that's the first point that I need to shift is I actually need to build something. I need to build the limbs on it. It's just like when a baby is being formed, the first thing that forms is it's not like let's form a foot. It's like we need the vital systems first.
Right.
We need to build the vital systems of the heart and the brain stem before we get the foot and the toes.
Yep.
So what people do when they're stuck in productive procrastination is they're focusing on like designing the fingers and like the fingernails.
Designing the website. Oh, my branding has to be la 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 la. And yes, I mean, there's that sense of the brand and the authenticity, like all of that stuff is important. But if you don't have something to the structure to hold it, it's anything with your life. When you're talking about moving from a creative energy, which is those higher level emotions, what is the structure that's holding you in that place so that you're not sliding back into the childhood pattern of I'm gonna get it, fill up, get it, and then realize, oh, this is not what I want, and throw it all up. And that continuous pattern, like, you did it with the food, right? And the men, and then the business and the money. And so, and now where are we at now?
Now we are at a learning point and curve because in 2020 and 2021, my coaching business just blew up. A lot of coaches who were already established, that happened.
Right.
And blew up in like a positive way. So we increased our profits 300%. The next year in 2021, I ended up having another baby. I lost 3 family members, including my father and 2 family friends. I still scaled 150%. And then I burnt out. Like I burnt out and found myself. We moved from Australia because we were those Americans who got stuck abroad. And we moved from Australia back to California to help my mom with sorting the estates, which if you've ever lost a family member and there's property and things, it is like adding an extra business to your business.
Yep.
I supported my mom in helping her get a buyout for her business that she had with my dad. And then we wrapped up those estates and moved to Texas. So there was 2 moves within 1 year, a baby, multiple deaths, multiple like grief. And honestly, it took about 2 years to fully go through that process of grieving, especially for my father, because that was a very complex relationship. And there was a lot of just anger. It was during COVID times and all of the challenges and being 8,000 miles away. There was a lot that came up. Yeah. And so there was a lot of healing that I had to do. And ultimately that caused me to be in business bulimia with my second business that I started, which was Communication Queens, where I was taking in business, but the OpEx was just consuming the cash flow and the profit. And after the successful launch of my book, Make Every Podcast Want You, in last year on International Podcasting Day, I came back, looked at the business, and I said, wow, we have a problem. At that point, I was 5 months pregnant with my 3rd child. And I said, the model is broken. This is not a model that's for me. It's a model that consciously makes sense. Again, it was one of those things that makes sense on paper. Let's do it. And it was me repeating that pattern of business, having a business that looked consciously good on paper, that here's all the things. And it's like, it was just like I had with my partnership in my e-com business. Here's all the ways that it could be incredibly profitable. And yet for some reason, it was a model that was not for me because it wasn't honoring my own zone of genius and where people really seek me out, which is in coaching and consulting and authorship. So we pivoted the business model in Q4 while I'm anemic, like borderline anemic, and with pregnant, and pivoted right before I went on maternity leave. I started to see the success coming in from the consulting. And I said, okay, I'm on the right track. I now can go on maternity leave. And now we're building with that solid foundation based on intuition first.
That's amazing. And one of the things that I see about that bulimia pattern is it's this I'm chasing this thing that I think is going to make me whole and make it like good.
It's like a diet.
Right. And when we're children, we're chasing our parents, trying to think that they're going to give us the love that's going to make us whole, instead of us listening to our own, how do I make my own love? How do I make my own joy? How do I make my own peace? And so what I hear this time around is that you've actually finally shifted into listening to what's true and right for you, which is the total be the wolf ethos.
Yep.
Instead of looking for the outside thing to fill you up and doing it the right way, doing it what you should do, and then realizing that that's not the thing and having to throw it up. So you're on the right track. You're moving forward in a totally different way and a much more powerful way. And it sounds like the signs are as they do, the synchronicities show up, the breadcrumbs show up, and all things start to fall into place with ease. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, and that's a shift, is also allowing for the ease.
Yeah.
Because that's also the, when you're used to a pattern of hard,
Yep.
it takes courage to actually have that ease.
Yeah.
And it sounds so counter, I don't want to say counterintuitive, because it's actually not counterintuitive, because it's not counter to your intuition, but it is counter to your programming.
Yeah.
And
100%.
like is 100% counter to my programming, is looking at, oh my gosh, I'm growing a business, but I'm doing it part-time. Like, honestly, and it feels great because I get to be there with my kids, and I get to be there present for my daughter, and also looking at motherhood and what mothering means to me, and the role of how I like to mom compared to what society says as to how I need to mom.
Yes.
This is a whole other topic.
Totally.
And that's trusting your intuition. Like, I know that I mom best when I go outside of my office and I work from a coffee shop.
Yeah.
Alone, like with no kids. And it was so funny. I walked into the coffee shop that I usually go to on Saturday, and the barista who knows me, she's one of the owners, and she was like, "Oh my God, I forgot you had 3 kids." And it's just it's being able to be in that paradox and being able to shift the roles.
Yeah.
And looking at how do they all combine holistically, so that I'm showing up as a leader, bold and courageous for my children. And I'm also showing up courageously for my business and for my clients and for my customers that I need to serve.
And for yourself.
And for myself, 100%.
Yeah. How do people work with you? How do we get in touch with you? How do we get more of your goodness in our lives?
If you love this episode and you love listening to podcasts, then just head on over to crownyourself.com/podcast and subscribe to the Crown Yourself podcast. And if you're looking to grow your visibility specifically through guest podcasting, then head on over to communicationqueens.com and just click the button that says get booked.
All right. Amazing.
Amazing.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, being vulnerable, and talking about stuff that a lot of people are experiencing and going through. But let's face it, people are now talking about mental health, but they're not talking about what's underneath that. They're not talking about the deeper stuff that people need to feel safe to talk about. And so it's so important that people like you, people like me, and all the other people out there who are being more visible in the world share the truth of their stories. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for having me, Genea. It has been my honor to be wolves with you as we go for attacking those belief systems that have held us back. And so I appreciate your reflections throughout this conversation and how deeply you listen. And I am sure your listeners feel that from you as well.
Amazing. All right, everybody. And remember, When you unleash the power of you, humanity evolves. We'll see you next time on Be the Wolf. Bye, everyone.